Hello and welcome to today's ICMI webinar. We're glad you've joined us for Is Your Knowledge Management Program Delivering ROI? Prove It. I'm Tim McElligin, Editorial Manager and Principal Analyst at ICMI, and I'll be your host for today's session. A few housekeeping announcements before we get started. If you have any technical difficulties during today's session, simply hit F5 to refresh your browser window. If you need assistance, please click on the yellow help icon below the slides and somebody will get with you right away. We do encourage you to ask questions at any time during our discussion. To do that, just type your questions into the Q&A window and hit submit. If we run out of time, you're welcome to get those to Roy and he'll get back to you offline. Additional resources related to this presentation can be found in the resource list widget, which is located in your console. And today's presentations will be available on demand shortly after the completion of this live event, and you'll receive an email reminder once that becomes available to you. With that, let me introduce today's ICMI expert, Roy Atkinson. Roy serves as CEO and Principal Advisor for Clifton Butterfield LLC and is one of the top influencers in the customer service and technical support industry. In addition to many other lists, in 2020 he was named one of the top 50 customer service experts of the decade by Nextiva, one of the top 150 global customer experience thought leaders and influencers of 2020 by Survey Sensum, and one of the top 10 CX contact center influencers you need to follow by Shelf. His writing and speaking engagements have gained him an international reputation, and he delights in bringing his years of experience to the community. Welcome, Roy, and thank you, and it's all yours.
Thank you very much, Tim, and thank you to ICMI for asking me to present on this important topic. I'm going to show you my contact information here so that if you jot those down or if you get a copy of the slide deck, you'll have that information in case you do want to get in touch with me afterwards. If you have questions or things you want to bring up. If we don't have time for the Q&A today, I have a lot of material to get through, so hang in there, bear with me. And I'm going to start off with some definitions. I want to make sure that we're talking about the same thing. So we have some common understanding of what we're talking about. There'll be a couple of polls today, and participate in those so we get some perspective on how you're thinking about knowledge management as well. I forewarn you that showing return on investment, ROI, is not easy. It is going to be hard work, and I'll talk about the reasons why it's hard work and how you can shape your approach to demonstrating ROI to maximize your chances of success. Because ultimately, probably the main reason you're thinking about showing ROI for your knowledge management is that you want to get more investment or continued investment in what you're doing. So we're going to talk about presenting a lot to senior leaders because they're the ones who have the purse strings. And there are a ton of reasons why knowledge management is important now, maybe more than ever. We'll look at some of those. And for our purposes here today, we're going to be looking at knowledge programs, not at any particular systems or methodologies, and I'll go into a little bit about the differences among those three things. One of the key barriers that many managers face in getting messages across to senior leaders is that they aren't looking at things from the same perspective, right? Senior executives especially have a different perspective from what department managers or line managers have. So I'll be looking at a couple of ways to broaden your perspective to get more in tune with what they're thinking as well, okay? We're going to look at metrics quite a bit because your measures are where you'll get the data you're going to need to show ROI, and we'll see why many organizations look at software systems rather than knowledge management programs, okay? So definitions. What is ROI? Performance measure used to evaluate the efficiency of an investment. Now, that might be a little different from the way you think about ROI. This is a little bit of a broader definition. It's not quite as simple, and there's a reason that I chose this particular definition from Investopedia. And it's because it's more in line with how you need to think about showing ROI from knowledge management. All right, let's look at the definition of knowledge management. And so it is a process of capturing, storing, sharing, and effectively managing knowledge and experience, right? So what we have here is that if ROI is a measure used to evaluate efficiency, not just a quick formula to calculate how much was spent versus how much was gained, although ultimately that's the result. Right? We want to do this in such a way to clearly show benefit without confusion when we talk about knowledge management ROI. Knowledge management is the process of capturing and storing and effectively managing. So the primary goal is to improve efficiency. So we've just said that ROI is a performance measure used to evaluate efficiency, and now we're saying knowledge management is primary goal to improve efficiency. So that lines them up pretty well, right? Well, it's not going to be easy to show how they align, and we're going to go through a lot of the ways that you can attack this. And here's one of the main reasons why this isn't going to be easy. Here's a little information from APQC. They did some knowledge management surveying, and they asked the respondents, who's the hardest group to engage? When you talk about knowledge management, who gets their eyes glazed over quickest? And the answer is senior leaders. 41% of the respondents said senior leaders are the people who don't get it or don't behave this way or don't want to talk about it. They're hardest to engage. And those are the people that we need to approach to get funding or approvals on the next steps that we're going to take in knowledge management. So you already see that you've got some barriers put up. You can't just walk into a board or an executive meeting and say knowledge management is great. A lot of times we make that mistake. We're naive enough to think that we can put together a nice presentation and walk into that meeting and convince people. That usually backfires. So we're going to look at a step-by-step approach to build and make your case for continued increased investment in knowledge management, right? So let's look at what the issues are. One of the issues is, of course, convincing the senior leaders. And they've experienced failures in the past. We tried it and it didn't work is a big objection. So that's why we're going to dig a little deeper and approach things a teeny little bit differently here. Senior management is resistant to change. Guess what? If things are going well, senior management is always going to be resistant to change. If things aren't going well, guess what? Then you're going to get people interested in making some changes. And of course, there's the objection of, I don't think our management realizes there even is such a thing. Well, that's a good place to start, because that means you've got a clean slate and you can explain what you're talking about. And here's where the different areas come in when we're talking about a program versus a system versus a methodology. And a lot of times they're going to jump to the conclusion that you're talking about buying a system or implementing a methodology, and that's not what we're going to be talking about. We're going to talk about why a program can be successful. So what's going on in organizations right now that might be a good backdrop for you to have this conversation? Top challenges right now for businesses across the board. Now, I compiled this little list from various and sundry studies, but you've got competition for talent, which, as you know, is very high right now. The Great Resignation is going on, and that increases competition for talent. There's organizations that are poaching people because remote work is so common now. They can reach out and grab people from other organizations without worrying about geographic location. There's a mismatch of skill sets happening as well. The people that don't have the skills to match the jobs that organizations have. Hybrid environments, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about what I mean by that. Collaboration. How many times do you see collaboration on a list of things that senior managers are interested in right now? Productivity, always. Brain drain, and by that I mean not only that some of your top performers might be leaving to go to other organizations, but also you've got the ongoing change in demographics, because baby boomers are retiring in large numbers now, and all that experience is leaving the organization. Also, transformation is a big deal. How many times do you say things about digital transformation, et cetera? Well, one of the big things that you have to do with the transformation is eliminating silos. And we're going to see how knowledge management can help you do that. Innovation, of course, always a concern for senior leaders. And what does that mean exactly? Well, it means maybe taking different things from different parts of the organization and putting them together in a new way to give you something different in terms of your outcomes. So you might not think of knowledge management from that perspective, but consider the fact that if you know what's going on in other areas of the organization, chances are you're going to have a better shot at doing some innovative work. Okay? Now, I've already mentioned how having a culture of a knowledge culture is really what creates value, right? Getting it across the organization. But that's not usually how it's seen. And this is an interesting insight from Deloitte. It shows that only about a third of the respondents considered that knowledge management was a way to tie knowledge to action. In other words, to do things differently based on knowledge. Okay, that's where the action comes in. Do things differently based on knowledge. It's one of the things you should be thinking about as you work to show ROI. How does knowledge change the way you do things in your organization? Ultimately, what you want to do or get to increase investment is to affect change. Well, what does that mean? Well, if you look at the Kotter 8-step program, the first thing you need to do is build a sense of urgency. So one of those things I mentioned before was hybrid work. That, of course, really started to become a concern. We had the pandemic hit. We had everybody was working from home. Then it came a time when people wanted to be back in the office, or bosses wanted them back in the office, and they don't want to be back in the office full time. Maybe they're going to be in a couple of days a week. So where some of the people are working at home, some of the people are in the office, all of those things. So you have the remote office kind of hybrid, but there's another kind of hybrid as well, and that is the human virtual hybrid, right? Some of you may already be using things like AI coaching in-ear or on-screen in contact centers. And that is becoming more common as the tools develop and get better for conversational AI. And the data gets fed into them and they get trained. And then, of course, there's distributed teams as well, which means, your contact center might be in 2 or 3 time zones, countries, continents, whatever. And that's been around for quite a while. And when you think about those things, the hybrid work and distributed work, it makes sense to have a central source of knowledge. And I'll come back to that again and again. So what else is top of mind for executives these days? Well, of course, customer experience. As you know, that's a big driver for every company, at least in terms of what they say. Okay, I won't be too skeptical here, but as you know, that's not always something that is addressed thoroughly. Also, employee experience has become more of a topic in the last couple of years, and the tie-in between customer experience and employee experience is being talked about a lot and studied a lot. So now we've got different ways of conveying knowledge. Now we've got chatbots, we have AI, machine learning. It's important to have a common source of knowledge when we're talking about omni-channel, because you want the information, regardless of the channel that the customer is using, to be available where you are as the agent, where your organization is, and vice versa. So you want that information to be consistent and available. And then there's always compliance issues. What do you need to think about in terms of GDPR? What are you able to tell customers and not able to tell customers, et cetera, et cetera? The compliance issues are everywhere, okay? So that's just a kind of a list of things that might be presenting a sense of urgency for your organization to get more invested in knowledge management. What we're going to be talking about, as I said, it's going to be a knowledge management program. So a program is a collection of organizational resources. And it's a little bit different from a project, because a project has an end date. Programs generally do not. This is an ongoing thing. It doesn't stop. It goes on. It improves on itself. It's cyclical. but there's always ongoing activity. A knowledge management system is an IT system that stores and retrieves knowledge, right? So, and a lot of times when people think about knowledge management, that's what they think about. They think about the technology as opposed to the programmatical structure that knowledge management entails. And methodology is how you do this. And there are several methodologies out there. Some are better than others. If you're interested in knowing more about them, that's great. And there are several that you can look into. And so if you think about it this way, both a system and a methodology can be part of a program. So as we go through this today, it's the program that I want you to focus on most. The why you should have the program, why it deserves to have funding, and how it can help you generate return on investment, right? Okay. So here's a little quick example of a program. It might have the chatbot that we talked about, customers facing knowledge base, which might include frequently asked questions, and might have a forum that provides peer support, and might be enabled by a technology platform that would be the system that underpins it. And then you might use a particular methodology. Probably the most common out there is KCS, but there are some other ones as well. And just noted at the bottom there, pro tip, real customer questions for FAQs. Most organizations don't. They make the questions up, which means they're skewed because they're coming from internal sources, not the customers. So if you're going to use FAQ, please, for goodness sake, capture the top questions that your customers are asking and use those as the FAQs. Okay, real FAQs. Otherwise, customers see right through it. You know, you go to a site, look at the FAQ, and they're all questions you would never ask. So make sure you're doing the right thing. Just as a side note, so why do people jump at the technology? One of the reasons is that it is easier to calculate ROI for a system than it is for a program. Remember at the beginning, I said this is going to be hard work. And here's one of the reasons why. It's a lot easier to say we spent $150,000 on this technology and got $175,000 worth out of it. But approaching the ROI of a program, and not just knowledge management, but any program, is a lot more work. And this is why many organizations have suffered knowledge management failures in the past. They expected the tool to do all the work, but it didn't. And so they think that knowledge management failed. It didn't, but it can be a bit of a hard sell because you've got to change the thinking that this is talking about a system and it's going to be easy to determine the ROI. Okay? Not easy. So let's have Tim conduct the poll here, and please give us your responses. I'm very interested to see how you think about this. Tim?
Thanks, Roy. We'll be running each of these polls for about a minute, so please go ahead and get your responses in. Our first poll question is, who stands to benefit from a good knowledge management program? In your view, is it the support staff, service desk, and contact center? B, new employees, C, customers, or D, support staff, sales, marketing, HR, facilities, production, management, customers, and other stakeholders? And please just select the one best answer in your opinion. Poll is open.
We should have the poll is open music playing in the background, right?
Well, it's I would sing, but nobody wants that.
Yeah, nobody wants that either. So I spent an hour last week waiting on hold, and the same 20-second loop of hold music was playing over and over again. So that was in my head for about a day and a half.
I think that there's a Geneva Convention against that, but nobody pays attention.
Truth.
Okay, we're getting good response. I appreciate that, folks. Thank you very much. We've got about 15 seconds left on this poll, and then we'll take a look at the results. And we're out. There we go.
There you go. I'm so pleased to see that. Almost 3/4 of you said that this broad swath of people can benefit from a knowledge management program. Thank you. You're exactly right. And we're going to look a little bit at that as well. So thanks for your responses on that. And it's important across the entire organization, right? Knowledge management can affect everything in the organizations. And just remember, as you're thinking about demonstrating ROI, that executives will be more likely to respond if it's not just about one area or group. If you go and say, hey, we could really use this in the contact center, well, okay, the contact center folks are probably going to be interested, and the contact center director is probably going to be interested. But the executive vice presidents and the CEO, maybe not so much, okay? Every group and every line of business can benefit from knowledge management, and just bear that in mind as we go through all of the work that you're going to have to do to get this done. There might be another objection embedded in thinking about knowledge management. We'll have to spend time writing documents that no one will read, or that have to be constantly edited, because you go to a knowledge base and it gives you a 14-page document on how to start up your whatever, and you're not paying attention to that. Well, let's think a little bit more about what a knowledge article is. Okay, Tim, we got another poll here for him.
Yep, second and final poll of the day. What do you think of when you think of a knowledge article? Do you consider that a document, a video or an audio recording, an image, all of the above, or none of the above? And again, we've got 1 minute on this poll, so please get your answers in.
And it'll be interesting to see. The effect of terminology might become evident here in a minute when I suspect we're going to get good answers on this, and I'm hoping because obviously if 3/4 of you answered the broadest selection of people in the previous poll, I think you're probably going to have a handle on this as well. But let's see what we got.
I guess it's too early to include the metaverse in here.
There you go. It's never too early to include the metaverse.
Right. We've got about 10 seconds left in the poll. All right. Again, a nice response. Thank you, folks. And we're out. Let's take a look at our results.
All right. There we go. Wonderful. About 12% of you think of a document, and traditionally that's what it's been. That's what your knowledge base may have. But yes, your 88% of you said all of the above, and that is correct. Basically, anything you can think of that conveys some knowledge and stores knowledge can be a knowledge article. And one of the ways that might help you to explain this, because this is not just to see what you think, but also to give you the tool to explain it to people who don't understand it. When you think of a knowledge article, think about an article of clothing, right? That could be a sock, it could be a shirt, it could be a pair of pants, it could be anything. When you say an article of clothing, it can be anything. And so the world of knowledge management opens up a little bit when you start thinking about it that way. Video can be an extremely valuable tool for transferring knowledge. Look at YouTube, right? How many how-to videos are there on YouTube? I know that sometimes if I'm trying to do something like changing the struts that hold up the hood on my car, I found YouTube extremely valuable to show me exactly how to do that. Depending on the topic, audio can be a great way to share knowledge as well. So it does not have to be written to be an article. 88% of you already said that. That's great. So before you jump out and start producing those wonderful videos and audios, a little bit of a piece of advice. Don't throw out what you have. Start where you are is an excellent way to approach this. And it doesn't really matter where you are. Now, you may conceivably have a knowledge base that looks kind of like that. It's like a collapsed building. And that can be a problem. Just have to do a lot of sorting to get this to start to make sense and be worthwhile. So remember what we said about who can benefit. You don't want to leave your customers, agents, and other stakeholders in the middle of the pile without knowing what they're looking for. So one of the ways to get those piles, these piles get made, is by not emphasizing the right things when we're talking about when we're measuring how we do knowledge management. So again, remember, everybody benefits if you get this cleaned up. And if you're encouraging people just to create articles, if that's your incentive, then guess what you're going to have? You're going to have more piles. And as you can see from this particular study from HDI, the number one metric that organizations are using is the number of articles created. So the incentive is to create more articles, create more articles, create more articles. And that's not a good thing. Of course, it's good to keep up things updated, but we're going to show how measuring some different, or emphasizing different metrics right from this list are not only going to help you stop that particular clutter, but also help you, give you the materials that you'll need to show your ROI, right? So here's the knowledge life cycle. And considering that particular metric, which is creating articles, this usually works out pretty well. Create and publish, that happens all the time. Organizations are really good at creating and publishing. Okay? But maybe not so good at updating. I don't know about you, but I run into knowledge articles all the time that are out of date. I remember not too long ago, I actually stumbled on a knowledge article that came up in the search that I used for Windows 95. I think it might be a little bit out of date. What we really aren't very good at is archiving and deleting. Right? We're not that great at making sure that the only things that are turning up in our searches are things that are current and correct. So update, archive, and delete, equally important to creating and publishing. And that way you can help to avoid the pile of rubble in the middle of that building that we showed, which only serves to confuse the people who are searching. It's bad enough that if you do a search and you don't get any results, or you get very few results. It's another thing entirely if you do a search and you get 32,475,000 results. Now, how do you choose? And the answer that Google provides is you have page one. And as the saying goes, the best place in the world to hide a body is on page 2 of a Google search, right? Nobody will ever find it. So now let's start thinking about the information that you are going to need to provide. You're going to have a job to bring data and show value. That's going to be the ticket to proving your ROI. So let's start. When you talk to upper management, it's really important to bring data. What are you basing your argument on? Of course, you're running at least some basic reports about this, I hope, but we're going to dig deeper to bring a lot of small bits to the surface that might be overlooked that can really feed your proof of return on investment. If you already have a knowledge base, I'm sure that you're tracking how many cases are closed with a link or notation about a relevant knowledge article, right? I hope. But why stop there? Keep digging. What about the queue time, the handle time, the customer effort scores, the customer satisfaction scores, or NPS, for the cases that are linked to knowledge versus those that aren't. Okay? That can show the usefulness and impact of knowledge. So if you've got a better time to resolve, if you have a lower queue time, a better average handle time, and better CSAT, NPS, or CES scores with the articles that are linked to knowledge, you can start to see where this is going here, right? It shows tangible results for having knowledge. Tangible results are what your executives are going to want to see. That's part of your ROI argument, is that you're seeing improvement in the time the customers are spending on hold and handle time, which means that your staffing can be a little bit different if you want to look at it that way, but that you're handling more volume in the same amount of time. There's lots of different ways to slice that. So if you look at them, you're going to have to dig into individual cases. You're going to have to take all the ones that have knowledge articles and look at the queue time, the handle time, the CSAT, the NPS, the CES for each one of those. And then compile those results, cross-tab them, all right? And we looked before at that most common metric, the number of articles created. Well, let's go down to the bottom of the list here. From contact volume down. How many tickets are escalated to higher levels of support? How could you reduce that number by having relevant knowledge, right? How many tickets are open for recurring issues? Only 17% of organizations were measuring that. Customer effort score. Level 0 solvable. And I'll come back to that. That means what can you have in your self-help area that will actually work? It's a very useful metric. So down there is some of the real pay dirt for showing ROI. If you can show that these things are being affected by the use of knowledge, then you're going to have some data to take with you. Okay? Now, this is kind of a fun metric. This is a goof metric. It's not a real metric. I want to stress that, but it's still fun to think about, and it's sort of a real metric. When you think about it, I call it the Where's Waldo of wisdom. It's the mean time to find someone. And I don't know about you, but in my career, I've spent a lot of time running around office campuses trying to track somebody down who was the only person who knew how to respond to a particular issue or question. And that could have been solved very easily had there been available knowledge, and there wasn't. So I have Carlos Casanova to thank for that. He's with Forrester. Mean time to find someone, it's kind of a fun thing to think about. But as much of it is a fun thing to think about, McKinsey says if you've got a searchable knowledge base, you can cut the time your employees spend on information lookup by up to 35%. Matter of fact, they just say 35%. They don't even say up to. 35%. That's a third of the time they spend looking things up. So that's effective use of knowledge. So think about that. And if you look at the time spent on a particular ticket, there's your average handle time and your after call work too, can be cut if you're using knowledge management effectively. So now you're starting to see some money here, right? If you're cutting down the number of tickets that get escalated, if you're getting recurring issues that can be pushed out to self-help, if you're getting higher customer effort, better customer effort scores, you're going to have better customer experience. And those are all good things. All right. So data. How many contacts do you get from marketing campaigns? This is the kind of things that if you start thinking about this, you'll start to see that there's all kinds of ways you can gather data that will help you feed your hunger for knowledge management investment, right? Marketing campaign hits, an advertising campaign hits, the sales folks launch an initiative. You may or may not know about that. And all of a sudden, you're taking calls or texts or contacts that relate to that particular campaign, and you're not really sure what to say. So now you're frantically calling. Now you're looking for the meantime to find someone in marketing to answer your questions. Start tracking that stuff, right? What about the number of cross-sell or upsell opportunities that need to have follow-up? Well, that's information that you might have because you know that the agent talked to the person about a cross-sell or upsell, but they need to get follow-up. Who's getting that information over in marketing and sales? Number of contacts for the same issue resulting from incomplete information. So I get told something, when I contact your organization, but you don't give me all the information I need, and I wind up having to come back to you again. That is a case of money going up the spout. It's money that doesn't have to be spent, and money that doesn't have to be spent is decreasing your return on investment. Right? So start tracking that stuff, but really start digging in here. I call it mining for ROI. So just take your top 10 issues. What are the top 10 things that your customers are contacting you about? How many recurrences for each one? How many are linked to knowledge? And then looked at, as we said, average handle time with knowledge, without knowledge. Compare those two. Look at the time savings involved. Look at the efficiencies involved. Remember, we said at the top that knowledge management is a way to increase efficiency, and that ROI is a measure of efficiency. So here it is. It's right here. It's on all these metrics that we're talking about. Show the difference between the ones that are linked to knowledge and the ones that are not. Then look at things like hits in your self-help that resulted in no contact. Just a note here, and this is one of my little personal. I'd rather talk about it this way. I don't talk about call deflection. I really don't like that term, and I've written quite a bit about it. I'd much rather talk about contact management. You don't want to deflect your customers. They're trying to contact you. They want to talk to you. You don't want to deflect them. That's like slamming the door in their face. Think about managing the contacts and getting customers to contact you or not contact you in a way that makes sense, but always with the aim not to deflect them, but to reduce the effort that they have to get the information that they need. Start thinking about it that way. It makes a difference when you turn it around that way. So how many searches of self-help with or without a chatbot that resulted in a contact? How could you do better there if you have better knowledge management? Feed the information to the chatbot if you have one. Maybe install a chatbot. Maybe that's going to be part of your knowledge program, to have an intelligent chatbot that is going to be able to assist customers in finding the information that they're looking for. So cost per contact times the number of searches resulting in a contact is going to be a useful formula for you to think about. All right? Let's go mining a little more. If you have a tiered structure, what is your cost at level 1? What happens if a particular question or issue gets escalated? And in fact, that issue was solvable at level 1. How could you make more things solvable at level 1? Well, the answer to that is provide level 1 the information they need to resolve it. So cost of escalations times the number of escalations of level 1 solvable issues, right? That feeds right into your ROI. Level 0 solvable, and I said I was going to talk a little bit more about this. LZS, it is a marvelous metric, and it can help you in a number of ways. Level 0 solvable is a measurement of customer service issues that could have been resolved by the customers themselves, usually through a knowledge base or FAQ, without having to contact customer service. It can also tell you when it's good to publish your information to your customers. When 60% of the time you can find the information that you're looking for, searching with the terminology that the customer uses to search. And as we know, a lot of times the customer's verbiage is different from your internal verbiage. And that's why I said that about FAQs. use the customer's verbiage because that's the way they're going to look for it. If you can provide that 60% of the time, if your people can find it using the customer's terminology, it's time to publish that to the customers, and it will be successful, right? Anything 60% and up. LZS, look it up. It's a great metric. Okay, so let's talk about this step-by-step of convincing people that you, in fact, are producing return on investment. We said start where you are, remember? So you need to find out where you are. So use the information that you've gathered from this metrics mining to see how you're doing now and how much you can improve, because that how much you can improve is really important, right? That's going to increase the return on investment as you go along, and we'll touch on that again in a few minutes. So what are your organization's current concerns? And that was a general list that I gave earlier on about, hybrid work and the interface between humans and artificial intelligence, all that stuff, distributed teams. But what are your organization's current concerns? What's going on in your world that has your management concerned that you think knowledge management might be able to address? So assess the needs that you have. Think about how knowledge management can be used in different ways. And we've looked at, the broadest definitions of things today, and most of you have a handle on, what an article is, and 3/4 of you said who can benefit. So keep that in mind. So dig deep and assess the needs of your organization. And for goodness sakes, be honest with yourselves. Be aware of what your failings are and be aware of what your strengths are. Okay, so if you're going to start where you are, you have to know where you are. Then go through this mining process. Gather the data. Which are the metrics that show the impact of knowledge management? And what's your plan to demonstrate improvement? And I'll talk about that again in a minute too. So you've got to get all the information together and start looking at how much it actually has an impact or potential impact on the way you're doing business now. Remember, what knowledge was there to do is to change the way you do things. Okay, now comes the fun part. One of the biggest mistakes that people make is putting together a nice presentation and walking into the board meeting or to the executive leadership meeting and saying A, B, C, D, E, and expecting everybody to say, wow, that's cool, let's do it. Usually not the way it works. So what you're going to want to do is seek some allies. Now, there might be some executives who already have a clue about this or are very much pro-knowledge management. And there also might be people across the organization that you can partner with. What about those people in marketing? What about those people in sales? What about those people in all the different areas of the organizations that might benefit from having a good knowledge management program? And the more common you make this, I mean, if you're using a good single source of truth, as it's often called, if you have that knowledge accessible to as many people as possible, and of course you don't want to publish all the knowledge to everybody. There's a lot of knowledge that you're going to gather that you won't show your customers. There's some knowledge you'll gather that you won't show to marketing, et cetera, because it's not relevant to them. But if you can show as much knowledge as possible to as many people in the organization as possible, and get them in the habit of looking things up before they reach out to ask questions, then you're going to have a much better oiled organization. And that will help people understand how to improve. So you get those people from across the organization, plus an executive ally or two. You might have heard one of your managers say, we need to find better ways to communicate across distributed teams. That's a potential ally, right? So talk to them, work with them, and then start to craft the message that you're going to have. Now, you've got a lot of data about the savings, the efficiencies, the reduced costs that you might incur, the benefits that your customers are going to get. Now start to craft that into a message that you're going to deliver to that executive meeting or to that board. Are you thinking about the whole organization? Remember at the top, I said that executives are more likely to listen to something if it concerns the entire organization rather than just one area. So make sure that you have the message crafted around that. And then there's the data and information that you and your allies can provide. And remember, they can replicate this data mining right across their areas too if you have allies from different parts of the organization. HR is going to find stuff that they didn't know before if they go digging for it. Facilities is going to find stuff that they didn't know before they started mining for it, et cetera, et cetera. So gather that information and start to craft that message in such a way that it makes sense and is compelling. Then you're going to think about presenting the data. And you're going to think about presenting it in such a way that it is convincing and compelling to the board or to the execs. And there's lots of tools out there for data visualization. And data visualization is an exceptional tool that we have now. We have great ways to present data now. And it doesn't just have to be little bar charts and stuff. It can be some really dynamic ways of presenting information. And you might have that within your organization. Maybe you'll work with some folks on marketing to use some of the tools that they have for data visualization, or IT. They often have really good tools for data visualization. Make it presentable and make it sticky for the executives. Execs love graphics. I, as an executive in my organization, I want to look at something, I want to understand it really quickly. If I don't understand it really quickly, a lot of times I'll want to move on to something else. So make it visually appealing and make it make sense. And of course, you have to show value. Now, showing value is not the same thing necessarily as showing dollar signs. There have to be dollar signs attached to this. Return on investment means exactly that. It means that your organization is going to spend money, perhaps training people, or perhaps getting new tools, or perhaps developing an organizational function of doing knowledge management. Whatever it happens to be, it's going to cost money. In order to do that, you've got to convince them that there's money to be had. That's where the data comes in, but to show the value shows that the money is going to the right place to produce the outcomes that you want. And here's a little thing about value. Maybe at some point when you were a kid, your parents got a new refrigerator. Now, the refrigerator obviously had value to them and to the family in general, because it meant that you might have more room than your old one, or it was more efficient than your old one, or it just replaced a broken one. So that was an obvious monetary value that it had, right? Preserving food. But there's another value. It came in a big box. And what happened to the big box? The big box turned into a gigantic toy, didn't it? Cut holes in it, and you made a little house out of it, you made a spaceship, that's value to the people who are consuming it. And I'll come back to that in a second. You might kind of scoff at that, but let's think about it. So as you go through this process of getting all the data and crafting the message and figuring out how you're going to present that, and who's going to present it? Is it going to be you? Is it going to be your executive ally? Is it going to be somebody from another department? Who's it going to be? Think about that, and think about showing the value. Remember, there's competition for talent now. That's different from what it was a couple of years ago. That skill sets are mismatched, and you're looking to plug the gaps. Hybrid environments are very much on top of everybody's mind right now. Collaboration is super important, because without collaboration, you're not going to have a whole lot of innovation, and innovation is super important. What about the brain drain? How are you going to maintain that knowledge that is walking out the door? Eliminating silos, breaking through the silos so that there's much more transparency across the organization, which really allows the room for transformation. And I've looked at that and talked about that and written about that quite a bit, because I am a fellow at the Institute of Digital Transformation, as well as the other things that I do. Transformation requires some fundamental changes, and they have to be organization-wide. Transformation talk is much more about the organization than it is about the technology. And this is one way to transform the organization, is to make it a knowledge-based organization. And these are just some of the ways that the value shows up, okay? Consider running a pilot program. Having done this numerous times in various and sundry positions, I can tell you that it very often is exactly the ticket. If you want to show people the value, run a pilot program and show them that it works. Prove that it works, and prove that it saves money, and proves that it makes things more efficient. And if you do this right, it will. It will. It's every organization after organization after organization that has done a serious knowledge management program has proved that it will work. So be careful as you go. Take the steps carefully. Do research. Do all that. And build a pilot program. Think about who some of your heavy users might be. Ask them to volunteer. Get them involved. And watch what happens. And I hesitate to guarantee anything, but I would almost guarantee that you will have some success. And going back to value, I love this by Warren Buffett. Price is what you pay. Value is what you get. They're not the same thing. Okay? So, business outcomes. Reduce time to proficiency. We didn't talk about that specifically, but that's one of the things, the key areas that knowledge management always talks about, is how much faster you can get your people ramped up to be proficient at their jobs. Reduce numbers of escalations. Why? Because the people at the first level have the information, or the people at the customers themselves going into level 0 have the information. Higher productivity. Because why? Because, as McKinsey says, 35% of the time you're not looking up for information. More consistency, which is really valuable to customers. Give people the same answer every time they contact, and no matter who they contact. Better communication and collaboration. Actionable information to product development about customer issues. What are customers talking about? If you put that in your knowledge base, everybody in the organization is going to see what they're talking about and understand what some of the issues are. Better preparation for artificial intelligence and machine learning. We don't like to talk too much about how much data and how much knowledge goes into feeding AI and machine learning, but it's massive amounts. And also, as I mentioned, fewer silos across the organization. You're going to be breaking through those silos. You're going to be setting yourself up for a better transformation, and that is top of mind for a lot of senior leaders today, looking at what's known as digital transformation. So make it happen. Understand what's involved, make your thinking broad, and present the right way at the right time, and by golly, the magic happens. And that's pretty much all I have to say. We have a little bit of time for Q&A here, Tim.
Yeah, if anybody's got any questions, please go ahead and type those into the Q&A section. We've got about 7 minutes here that we can respond. Otherwise, as we said, you can contact us offline, and we'll get as much information to you as we can. So it looks like Roy, that you've answered all their questions proactively.
Either that, or I bored them to tears. I hope not.
I doubt that very, very much. So since we don't have any Q&A, I'm going to go ahead and close up. That's the end of our hour. Thank you to everyone in the audience for joining us. Thank you, Roy, for a fantastic hour of information. To the audience, as a reminder, you will receive a follow-up email that's going to include a link to view a recording of today's, in this case, listen to a recording of today's presentation. So if you found this event useful, please share that with your colleagues. And once you leave this event, a short survey is going to pop up in your browser window, and we'd appreciate it very much if you'd share your feedback on this webinar. That helps us tailor all of our programs to make sure that we're covering the topics that you're interested in. Have a great day, and we'll hope to see you again soon.